happy to have you, Kent, and thanks so much. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Hey, thanks so much, Ben. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. And yeah, let me get my screen shared here really quick. Share screen.
This guy works at PaperCake.
Yeah.
Okay, is that, are you all seeing my screen? Okay, I'm seeing some nods, so that's, oh shoot, I just like clicked on one of my links. That's Utah. Let me go back here to my slides. All right, cool, yeah, so this is just a bunch of stuff about me. Ben was nice and kind of already introduced me. All of these things are linked, as we saw with Utah. So if you're interested, you can find my slides at kcd.im/js-tools. And yeah, I'm not going to go through the slides any more than that. So yeah, let's talk about some tools. And in particular, I like to set up expectations for the talks that I give so that you all can tune out if you're not interested, and get on with your day. So I'm going to give an opinionated and experience-based talk about tools. I'm not going to cover every tool you need in your application. That would take way too long. And already, like the content that I do have, I'm going to have a hard time fitting. So just be prepared for quick rundown. It's also not perfect for every scenario. Like I'm going to suggest some tools that will work in most cases building web applications, but may not be fit for some scenarios. So just take all that with a grain of salt. Okay, cool. So before we talk about specific tools, let's talk about what makes a tool good. And so one thing that makes a tool good is just the fact that it does the job you need it to. Yeah, it wouldn't be all that useful if it didn't actually do the job. But then the other thing is that it has a wide pit of success. So I'm going to talk about pit of success really quick because I think it's a really important concept for people to get. So pit of success. I drew this. I am a programmer, obviously. Not a artist. Not that programmers can't be artists, but I am certainly not one. But hopefully this gives you the idea. This is a pit of success. So you fall in the pit of success and you're happy you have built an application successfully, whatever. And when the pit of success is narrow, we set up these signposts to point people in the direction of the pit of success, and we call these conventions. And so these are things that, like, if you just do this, then you will be successful. And so the narrower the pit of success, the more signposts you need, and the more likely it is that people are going to see the signpost or the convention and not understand what it means, or not see the signs at all and just have a hard time finding the pit of success. But then there are some who see the signposts, they understand the convention, they apply it, and they jump right in the pit of success. And often these people are really confused as to why everybody else is having such a hard time, because like, well, you just do these things and it's so easy, but it's really not. And so what's even better than having these conventions is if you have a wide pit of success. A pit of success that is so wide, it's impossible to not fall into it. Or at least it's really, the natural thing is to do the right thing. And so that's what makes a tool great, is if it has a wide enough pit of success that it's hard to do the wrong thing. Not impossible, because sometimes you do need to be able to do some special case thing, but making it really easy to do the right thing and the natural thing to do the right thing is what makes a tool really good. So a couple of things that make a pit of success for a tool wide. The tool needs to be simple and it needs to do things automatically. So the more things that the tool can do correctly for you just out of the box, the less things you can mess up. And the simpler it is, the less of a chance that you'll like not do the right thing. So there are fewer things for you to do in general. Okay, so let's talk about our tools. So for each one of these tools, I'm going to have a couple of attributes of the tool, and then you can kind of like guess in your mind what you think this tool is that I'm going to talk about. So this first tool is how we get tools, and this tool is ubiquitous. I'm getting reverberation. Yeah, so this first tool is ubiquitous and fast, and it's reliable, and it's the de facto standard for getting tools. And that tool, and this is in the context of JavaScript. I know that in your curriculum, you're learning about more than just JavaScript. So all of my stuff, I should have prefaced this, all of this stuff is about JavaScript. So if you don't care about JavaScript, you can jump off, because like that's all I care about. So yeah, the de facto standard for getting tools with JavaScript is npm. And so for each one of these tools, I have a little demo, but I don't have a whole lot of time. So you can look at my slides and watch these demos later. I'll just show you a couple of the demos, but this just shows you how you install stuff with npm. So it's great. npm, fantastic tool. Okay, so for the user interface, this tool is really fast, and it's easy to build and maintain applications with it. And it has a fantastic community, lots of educational material and libraries and things. The skills that you learn using this tool are transferable. So there's a very small domain-specific API. And it's easy to reason about. And like people toss this phrase around. I think it's kind of a silly phrase. But the idea behind this is that like when it's done right, it's just really like it's much easier to understand where things go and how to do things correctly. With this particular tool, the pit of success is pretty wide, so you don't even need to think about that lots of the time. And that tool is React. I love React. I think it's fantastic. And this is just a little demo app that I made inside of Code Sandbox. I'm not going to show you because it's like going to take quite a bit of time, but you can go watch it later. But a couple of key things I want to talk about with React is that I think one of the biggest reasons why React is so great is that it answers the question of where do I put state? State is probably the most complicated part of any application, is where do you put state? And React is really great at answering that question because the component model. And so if I have a bug around like where the user's typing in this field, for some reason there's something going on right there, I know exactly where to look. Because the question, or the answer to the question of where do I put my state, is really clear. It's just right inside of your component. It's really, really nice. And the fact that React put the HTML, this weird JSX looking stuff, right in the JavaScript is actually a huge win. So it makes it so that you can kind of marry these two things, the JavaScript and the HTML, which really are so coupled together that there's no reason to not have them just right there next to each other. And more tools are kind of jumping on that bandwagon. So React is great. So a couple of handy libraries that you can use with React that I suggest as React Router. It's de facto for the web, at least. It is so good. I recommend that. Glamorous, I'm actually wearing my Glamorous shirt, if you can see that. This is a library that I wrote for PayPal that allows you to make components that carry their styles with them. So we talked about how HTML and JavaScript together are kind of important. Like you can't have a component that is a complete component without being able to both see it and interact with it. And the final piece of that is the styling on it. And Glamorous allows you to take the thing that you can see and the thing that you can interact with and style that, all three of those together, making a component. And so Glamorous allows you to do that in a really easy way with React. Axios is fantastic. It is my go-to solution for making asynchronous requests on the server and on the client. So making HTTP requests. Redux is pretty good. I'm not a huge Redux fanboy, but I think Redux is pretty good for big complex interactions or applications with state. So Redux, I couldn't get away with a slide like this without putting Redux on there. So Lodash is also great. It's also very, very big. So if you can cherry pick the things that you need from Lodash, that's even better. But I like Lodash a lot. And then there's this React Intl library that I think is really great if you're doing internationalization. It's a good one. Okay, so next tool, code optimization. So this tool allows us to use the latest features of JavaScript without worrying about browser support. It allows us to pre-compile our code at build time. and it easily integrates with all the other tools that we want to use. And this tool is Babel. Babel is an incredible tool. I've been using it since it was 6.5 back in 2015, like the end of 2014, I think. So quite a while now, and it is just so good. So I'll show you the demo for this one really quick. So this is the Babel REPL. You can get to it online, and it just shows you on the left side the code that I'm typing, and on the right side the code that's generated. So it converts an arrow function to a regular function, converts object spread to this extends function that does the same kind of thing. It turns classes into functions, and it even supports inheritance and all of this stuff. And it's doing it magically to your code, every single time that as you write it. And it supports JSX, converted JSX to React.createElement, so it runs in the browser. Babel is one of my favorite tools, and I love it. And one of the cool things about the version 6 release that was released almost 2 years ago, I guess, is that it allowed you to create custom plugins to plug into the Babel ecosystem. And so here are some great plugins. Babel preset env is fantastic. It's kind of like a CSS auto prefixer where you say, hey, here are the browsers I need to support. Apply auto prefixing to support those browsers. Babel preset env is the same kind of thing. It will transpile only the things that you need. So if you're just trying to support Node version 6 or something, or the latest version of Chrome, you actually don't need to transpile a whole lot. And so Babel preset env will only apply the transforms that are necessary for you. Here's one of the things that I really like about Babel is that it allows you to optimize for both the developer experience and the user experience. And so with React, we have these prop types that are kind of for the developer experience. It's nice to have these warnings in the console if we're using components incorrectly. But that benefit to developer experience comes at the cost of user experience, because you're sending all of these prop types to the client. And if you're doing things right, you're not going to be in production mode anyway, so it won't actually run, but you're still sending that code, and that's a waste. And so Babel can step in and remove that code for you automatically, and that's this custom Babel plugin. And then there's this constant elements thing that's really cool. You can take a look at that later. The module resolver, a special Lodash plugin that's great. This console plugin allows you to really beef up the context around your console, which I think is super duper awesome. React Intel library has a Babel plugin that's really useful. I've written these two Babel plugins pretty recently that I think are pretty cool. You should check out Preval and CodeGen. Pretty cool things that you can do with Babel. So there's more, but I don't got time, so we're just gonna keep on going. So the build pipeline. Every modern application needs to have a build pipeline of some sort, so that you're not sending just your raw JavaScript code to the browser. You need to optimize that somehow. So this tool allows us to load only the things that we need when they're needed. And it allows us to do this with very little impact on our source code. It's very cool how it works. It allows us to structure things in the way that's easy to maintain. So using modules and that kind of thing. And it allows us to easily integrate with the other tools that we want to use, and that tool is Webpack. This is a fantastic tool, and it's only been getting better. And I've got a little demo I'll show you here of the twitter.com, the mobile website. So you go to m.twitter.com, and you'll see it loads up a bunch of these scripts here. I'm going to clear those out, and as I navigate around, you'll see that it starts loading more scripts. So with single page apps, often you'll have just all of the JavaScript in one single bundle. You go to the page and it loads the whole application, and you navigate around and you have all the JavaScript you need for the whole app. Well, with Twitter, they're using Webpack using a concept called code splitting, and it allows them to just load the JavaScript that's necessary for that page. And that's awesome because let's say you're using a library like D3. In that scenario, D3 is an enormous library, and so you're only using that on the admin page, so most people don't need to see that ever. So you only load that on the admin page, but you don't have to do a full page refresh to get new assets or anything. You just you lazy load it. It's awesome. Webpack is very good. And that's only one of the many things that it can do. It's very cool. So just a couple of plugins that I think are great. HTML Webpack plugin. Webpack config utils is a library that I wrote to make it so that you can write all of your config in a single file. Because if you've seen, some projects have webpack.dev.config.js and webpack.config.prod.js and different versions of their Webpack config. I think that's confusing and harder to maintain. And so this tool just gives you a couple of utilities to make it so you can really easily put all of that config in a single file. And I think that makes it a little easier to maintain. React Loadable is a tool that's great and enables code splitting with React in a really nice way. The offline plugin just has a really, really cool logo, but it's also a very awesome tool as well. Makes your application work offline. It's very awesome. Okay, and there's awesome Webpack for more. Okay, so I have about I wanted to leave some time for questions. I'm halfway through. I'm going to try, well, I'm halfway through my time. I don't know if I'm halfway through my slides, but I'm going to try and leave some time for questions still, so I might pick up the pace just a little bit. So code quality. This tool allows us to reduce the number of tests we need to write, increase our confidence when we're refactoring code, and it brings static types to JavaScript, and it integrates, or you can quickly add it to an existing code base and get value immediately, and it easily integrates with other tools we want to use. This tool is FlowTyped. FlowTyped is awesome, and I definitely want to show you the demo for this. So here I have this. Actually, before I do this, just look at that and see if there's a problem that you can see. So there is a bug in this code. It's not going to do what you might think it does just based off of variable names and stuff. So the problem here is I'm passing an object literal to say hello, and that cannot be coerced to a string. It's just going to be like toString on an object, funny thing. So that's not cool. So right here, Flow right immediately notices, oh, hey, you're actually passing an object into this function. So I think something's wrong. Either this should be accepting an object and getting the name property off of that object, or you need to change this. But it's going to put the warning on here. It doesn't really know what you were actually trying to do. One thing, like kind of the elephant in the room with types in JavaScript, is there's also TypeScript. And with TypeScript, instead of putting a comment at the top of the file, you change the file name to .ts. And that works great. But if I were to change the file name to .ts on here, TypeScript actually would not catch this. If you don't explicitly type something, it types it as an implicit type because it's not quite as good at doing inferred types like Flow is. That's why I say Flow is able to really quickly provide you value as you add it to a code base. So here we'll go ahead and make this change to name here. We'll type this as a string, so this needs to be a string. And now we're getting an error, another error. So we're saying, hey, either you typed this wrong, this shouldn't be a string, it should be an object, or you're passing the wrong thing. And so we can go and say, no, I'm passing the wrong thing. I just want to pass the string. So Flow is great. I definitely recommend looking into Flow. Okay, so what about discouraging suboptimal patterns? So like there are things that we do in our code bases that are not entirely awesome, and we could improve those. So this tool allows us to reduce the number of tests we need to write, increases our confidence when refactoring. Sounds kind of like the Flow type stuff. It's totally pluggable and allows us to do our own custom stuff. And that is a really powerful thing, just like with Babel. And it's pluggable kind of in the same way. And it easily integrates with all the other tools that we want to use. And this tool is ESLint. Highly recommend ESLint. I'll show you the demo for this one too, for sure. So we've got a couple of errors here. First, we have this string is underlined, and we're doing a type of, we misspelled string, and it knows that like there's no type that is whatever word we had in there. So you must have made a typo here. Look at this code and see if you can figure out what's wrong with it. Like, why would this be a problem? So what's happening here is the way that JavaScript is going to evaluate this is not in the way you might expect. It's going to evaluate it as like not SW in Navigator. What we want is not SW in Navigator. So by putting parentheses around that, we make that more explicit. Because if we did not SW, that's false. And so then we're effectively saying false in Navigator. So ESLint can catch that for us. Here, we're saying that greeting is not being used, but we're using it right there. Well, it turns out that we're using single quotes instead of a backtick, so it's not a template literal. So ESLint can catch that for us. This one's kind of interesting. So you'll notice, and maybe this makes you throw up in your mouth a little bit, but I'm not using semicolons. I have a blog post about that if you want to see kcd.im semicolons. I'm not going to talk about it. I wrote a blog post about it, so I don't have to talk about it anymore. But there is a drawback to not using semicolons, and that is this problem. So the way that JavaScript is going to evaluate this is it's going to say, okay, you want to call console log, and whatever's returned from that, I'm going to access a property off of that, which is not at all what I want to do. So we can solve this by adding a semicolon. But I actually don't ever run into this problem because I don't like doing things like this. I would actually give this array a variable name and then call for each on that. That solves the problem. Another thing that ESLint can do for you is it can do some style checking here. So I prefer that my arrow functions, if they have a single argument, don't have parentheses. And so it can check that style for you. This next tool is going to be kind of related to that. Yeah, so some helpful plugins and configs here. All of these are very great. So check these ones out. They're awesome. Okay, so here's a workflow tool that I think is fantastic. This one eliminates the need to argue over code format and formats your code for you automatically as you go, which is magic. It integrates super well with all major editors. This tool is Prettier. And I'm going to add a -ESLint onto here. So Prettier was created by James Long, and he's a fantastic, awesome person. And I created Prettier ESLint so that I could integrate the experience together. Because as you saw, ESLint is capable of warning on particular like code format stuff. It also is capable of automatically fixing some of that stuff. And so by putting these two things together, I can have the configurability and the customization of ESLint with the power of Prettier. It's pretty awesome. So I'm just going to show you the first one here. I'm writing a really long component, and normally here is where you do a new line, right? Well, I'm actually going to write this whole thing out on a single line. So here I have this long component, extends a React component. It has some state, there are some users. We're going to render a div, and for each of these users in the state, I'm going to render another div that has the user's name. And I'm doing all of this on a single line, and yeah, I never really do this, but watch this. Prettier formats this whole thing for me just magically, and it looks great. So Prettier is awesome. It does this with more than just JSX. It'll do this with any JavaScript. And so it's just an amazing experience, and I recommend that you check that out for sure. So yeah, Prettier is pretty great. Okay, so some supporting tools here, Husky and lint staged. I love these tools. So Husky is a Git hooks manager, and lint stage is a tool that I use in my Git hook. So here, I'll just give you a demo in the glamorous repo of using Husky and lint stage with Prettier ESLint. So I have a file that's staged ready to commit, and I'm going to go ahead and commit that with add a thing. And the first thing that happens is Husky says, hey, you have a pre-commit hook, a pre-commit Git hook. So when you do a Git thing, I'm going to check for some hooks, and you have one for the pre-commit phase of the Git life cycle. And so I'm going to run that script, and that script is going to run lint staged. And lint staged is going to say, hey, look, you have a file staged for commit. So I'm going to run whatever scripts you want me to. And I said, I want you to run Prettier ESLint right, and then add any of the changes that were made to that file. So I'm going to run those and automatically get all that to happen. Then I have this validate script that I'm going to run the linting and the tests and the build. And it's just this magical thing that happens every single time I commit some code. So I never commit something that's wrong. And with Prettier ESLint, it automatically gets fixed for me. So even if my editor isn't hooked up with Prettier ESLint, it doesn't matter. When I go to commit code, it automatically formats it for me anyway, which is super awesome. Okay, so with the last couple minutes, I'm going to just skip past this one. This one's kind of obvious. Chrome is awesome. Definitely check out the videos, and then there's React DevTools and a bunch of other things here, and I demo React DevTools here a little bit, so you can check that out. And also node-inspect. So if you've never used this before, I recommend giving this a try. It's a pretty awesome experience for debugging Node applications. I can't skip this one. This is very important, testing JavaScript. This tool is really straightforward, and it requires minimal setup. It's very cool. That is not something you hear about testing tools like a year ago before this thing. It integrates seamlessly with existing tools, and it's really easy to write both unit and integration tests, especially if they're asynchronous. You get really quick feedback on broken tests, and it's very, very fast. Even if you have thousands of tests, it'll still be fast for the tests you need to run. And this tool is Jest. It is the best. I've used every testing tool that there is. I've gotten very excited about many of them. But when Jest became cool, it became really cool. And I definitely recommend you look into Jest. So here's just a quick little demo. We've got a couple of test files in here, and we've got some source files. So I'm just going to run the Jest command. It's going to look for my tests and run those tests. I can run a specific one. And then here's where it gets really cool. Jest watch mode. And right here it says, no tests found related to files changed since last commit. Press A to run all the tests, or just with watch all. So I'm going to press A, and it's going to run all of my tests. And then I'll press O again, and it's going to go back to that previous mode. So what's really cool about this is I can make a change to the subtract source file, and it's going to say, oh, the subtract module cares about that source file, so I'm going to run that test. So I'll get rid of that. And it's like, oh, well, nothing's changed now. So now let's go to the sum module, because subtract depends on the sum module. And I'm going to make a change to this file. And what's cool about this is that there are actually two tests that depend on this, and both of those tests will run. And that's a feature I'm not aware is available with any other testing framework, is that it's able to intelligently identify all of the tests and identify the files that are relevant to those tests, and only run the tests that are relevant. You can also, in the watch mode, only run the certain tests based off of a regex. So you're going to really fine tune which tests you're going to be running. And then you can even run tests, like specific tests based off of the title of their test. So here we say subtract two numbers, and we'll say we only want to run the tests that match the test titles that match this regex. So very, very cool. Another thing, or a couple of helpful companions to Jest, especially if you're doing front end and React tests, is Enzyme and Jest Glamour React. So this is super duper awesome. So if you aren't familiar with CSS and JS, I suggest you get familiar. It's very cool. And one thing that you can do with CSS and JS is the fact that the CSS is generated from the JavaScript that you're testing. You can actually find out what would be generated, what would be injected into the DOM if I was running this in a real browser, and you can use that in your tests. So here's what I mean. I've got this toggle component, and I'm testing it. I'm running the watch mode here, and I'm using CSS and JS. So I want a border color that's darkening the primary color. And here in my test has on styles applied when initial toggle on is true. I get a test failure when I make a CSS only change. And so that's pretty awesome. It shows me exactly what the generated CSS would be. And it gives me this snapshot summary. One test snapshot failed. So either inspect your code or press U. So let's inspect our code. Let's change that. Okay, so tests are not broken. That's great. Let's change it back because we do actually want to change that. And we'll press U to update our snapshots. And so we press U and our snapshots are good. So we're good. Now we look at the diff, and we can see in our snapshot file the change that we made. So we said, this is a good change. This is what we want. So we see that in the snapshot. That's basically our test has been changed to account for a change in our source code. And it was super easy to make that change. So then we also have the change in the source code. So you make a pull request like this, and you can see what impact did changing this have on our application. So here, all you need to do here is with Jest, you render your component, and then you say, I expect that thing to match a snapshot, and Jest will take care of the rest. And you render it just like you would anything else. So it's just regular JSX. You give it to Enzyme, and it'll give you back a wrapper, and then you can match snapshot on that. And then for the tooling setup, you just install a couple dependencies, Jest, Glamor, React, and Enzyme to JSON, and then you can configure it all in your package JSON just with Jest. You say, I want to use JS DOM and these snapshot serializers, and you get all this magical stuff. It's so cool. So definitely check out Jest. So I've got like literally 50 seconds left, and we didn't get to talk about end-to-end tests. This is an amazing tool, and I recommend you go take a look. I've got a couple of demos of using this tool that I wish that I had time to show you, but I don't. So yeah, check those out. Very cool tool.
You can take an extra 5 minutes if you want to on that.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is my last tool. Let me just make sure. Oh no, it's not. So I'll use the rest of my 5 minutes. Go check out Cypress. It's very cool. But I'll use the rest of my time on these last couple tools. So a couple random tools: NPS, NPX, Create React App, Babel Code Mod, and NowSH. And I've got demos for each one of these. And then there are a bunch of other ones that I suggest you go take a look at. They're very cool. NPS is a tool that I created that you saw kind of a demo of this when I showed you the glamorous Git hooks thing. It ran like a bunch of things, and it was all colored and everything. It's an awesome script manager. NPX, if you haven't used NPX yet, definitely look into that. It actually, if you have the latest version of NPM installed, then it has NPX by default. That's just automatically installed. It's a great tool. Learn it and use it all the time. Create React App, also an awesome tool. Allows you to bootstrap a React app really quickly. So definitely check out Create React App if you haven't, because it's great. And actually, I should add on here also codesandbox.io. It's basically like Create React App in the browser, and you can actually download a Code Sandbox, and it will give you a Create React App, like created app. So it's still using React scripts and everything like that. It's very awesome. And most of my stuff starts in Code Sandbox, and when I want to get really serious about it, I'll download it. But Code Sandbox is amazing. And then Babel Code Mod. So I think code mods are awesome. Like this demo shows you how you could use a code mod to migrate from jQuery to just raw like DOM APIs. And so yeah, learning about what a code mod is and that kind of thing, I suggest you look into that for sure. Code mods I don't care how good your regex find and replace skills are, you're not going to be as good as a code mod. And then now.sh, this one's really quick. So I've got this this project, and I'm going to say, hey, I want to use npx to go get now, and then I'm going to run now on this static like website that I have, and it instantly deploys that, copies this URL to my clipboard, and I go and paste it, and the website gets pushed up, and poof, the whole website is up, and I can paste that URL, and it is literally that easy. It's a very, very cool tool. And it works with like Docker containers and all that stuff. Now.sh is awesome. So that's all that we have time for. That's actually more than we had time for, but there you go. So this last slide, I have a link to my slides and a link to a form for feedback, and I would really appreciate your feedback. I realize if this was like super fast, tell me if you would prefer that I cut out material so that I wouldn't have to go so fast. Or tell me if you want me to add material. But whatever it is, tell me. I appreciate it. Thank you. And I'm definitely, I have time to answer any questions that you have. I don't know if you have time, but I do. So.
Yep, I'll make sure that we have time, Kent. First of all, awesome presentation. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
Here's a funny one. Anyone else overwhelmed with the amount of tools? Is there a tool for that?
Tool overwhelmingness, I'm not aware of any tool to take care of that.
right, so let's see.
Is there a chat or something that I should be looking at?
Well, there's the Slack. I'm just looking at all three channels. And I believe if we, let's see, let me go back at one of your old slides. It's like a third of the way through.
I've got one while we're waiting. So I looked around at Glamorous a little bit on GitHub and kind of saw some of the open issues, and it seems like there's definitely a lot of kind of work to be done there. Do you have any recommendations for some of us, maybe kind of like at a beginning level, some of the different things we could work on, or just check out the issues? Or
yeah, you mean to help out?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So for sure there are things that you could work on. Glamorous actually is fairly stable as far as the API is concerned. There aren't too many things that I really want to do to change it, or like some things that could be done especially for newcomers is making examples. So we have if you go to glamorous.rocks, that's like literally the URL. There's a examples page, and that's just for community examples. And I think one of the most important parts to building a community is having good examples for people. On a previous library that I wrote that got pretty popular, I had like 60 examples, and I pretty much never had to answer a question about things. I just like pointed people to the examples. It was awesome. So yeah, if I could get some more examples on the website. Also, for anybody who's bilingual, the website is currently translated in like 6 languages, and it's not like complete either. So helping with translation is also would also be a really great help. As for like, if you really want to get into the code of Glamorous, there are places where we could probably optimize for performance a little bit, and that would be helpful. There's also like one opportunity that could be really, really awesome, but would require a little bit of like a lot of effort, is I kind of started an ESLint plugin for linting your CSS and JS. And so you say, I want this div to have display flex, but you misspell flex. I want ESLint to be able to catch that. And like I said, I kind of started something like that. You can find it in the issues if you just look for ESLint. That would be a huge effort to try and write a rule for every CSS key and property. But that would be an enormous help to not just Glamorous, but the entire CSS and JS community. Yeah, that would be amazing. So lots of opportunities, and definitely feel free to ping me if you are looking for something to do. I'm happy to help.
Sweet.
Cool. All right, so I have a student who'd really like to hear more about what you do at PayPal, what you do at PayPal and the work you do as a software engineer.
Yeah, so I actually just changed roles officially yesterday. But before I was a product engineer. I worked on if you go to, I don't know where I should chat links and stuff. Where's the best place to do that? Just in general?
If you want to PM it to one of the instructors, or there is a Zoom chat function, and I'll just post it to all 3
I've
channels.
got the chat open here. I'll just put that there. So if you go to, let me pull it up, paypal.com/myaccount/transfer. And you log in, that first page that you land on is actually the reason that Glamorous was created. And I made it to make creating that page easier and maintaining that page, because it's a highly experimental page. Depending on where you are in the world and what kind of account you have, you might see something entirely different. And so, yeah, I'm responsible for, or I was responsible for that page primarily. And then if you click on the send to friends and family internationally, that's the cross-border page or flow. So you want to send to friends in Germany or something, you can go through that flow to send money to them. And actually, if you do go through that flow, you'll hit a country selector that's like a autocomplete country thing. And the other project that I'm kind of working on right now is called Downshift. And I created it to replace this autocomplete experience to make it easier to create autocompletes like that. So yeah, you can go take a look at Downshift too, and Downshift should be shipped in like a week or 2 on PayPal.com as well. And once that happens, then 1.0.0 will also be released. So Yeah, so that's what I did was product work. But what I'm doing now is more architectural work. So yeah, working on like how do we make our page load faster, and how do we make it easier for other teams within PayPal integrate with the peer-to-peer payments system that we have. Yeah, lots of more like lower level, like developer productivity kind of stuff. So.
All right, cool. I've got a big one here. It's a doozy.
Okay.
What's it like being on TC39, and can you explain the difference between ECMAScript versus JavaScript? You can break that down if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. I was just on a couple of podcasts where I talked about some of this, so I'm just going to paste a link to those. But being on the TC39 is overwhelming. I really don't feel like I belong there. I'm not a language designer or anything, but I try to represent the interests of like people who are writing JavaScript applications. And so like I try to make sure that the things that we're learning or that we're adding to the language are going to be easy to teach, or are going to satisfy the patterns that I'm seeing in the community, make it easier to follow certain patterns or enable certain things. But as far as like the actual meetings and how those go, it's every other month. At the end of the month, we meet for 3 days, and they're full day meetings. Lunch is catered and stuff. We don't like really go anywhere. And there are tons of people there, representatives from Google and Apple and Facebook and PayPal, obviously, and a bunch of other companies like Mozilla, other companies you probably are less familiar with. But yeah, just like tons and tons of companies send representatives. They have to pay to be on the committee. And we just like have an agenda, and we like churn through that agenda as fast as we can, and we often don't get through everything because there's just way too much to talk about. So so and then between meetings we're working on proposals and trying to improve or like prove out things, working with the community, trying to figure out what people need and what people want. Sometimes the meetings are super duper boring, so I get a lot of work done because it's like, okay, you're talking about this thing, and it's kind of a lower level thing, and I don't really care what the end decision is going to be about this because my code is going to run just fine either way. So yeah, but lots of the time it is really interesting. It's not like a smoke filled room, like people making fishy payments under the table or anything like that. It's just like a normal meeting. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that does answer part one, and here's part two.
Oh, right. Yeah. What was the part two?
Part two was if you could explain the difference between ECMAScript and JavaScript.
Yeah. So ECMAScript is so actually, first off, the committee is called TC39, and that is a committee from the ECMA International company. They have a bunch of committees for standardizing like languages, but also standardizing like the CD-ROM and like all kinds of different standards. And with the ECMA committee, when they decided they're going to adopt JavaScript, the JavaScript specification, they wanted to just call it JavaScript. But a certain company that I'm not going to mention had the copyright on JavaScript, and they didn't want to give that to ECMA. And so they decided just to call the specification for JavaScript ECMAScript, and then implementers implement the ECMAScript specification. So that's like browsers like Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Edge. And so they'll implement the ECMAScript specification so you can write JavaScript to run on their platforms. So it's kind of confusing, but ECMAScript is the specification and JavaScript is the language.
Oh man, I hear that trips up a lot of people, ECMAScript versus JavaScript.
Yeah, well, and the problem is too that like, because now we're on yearly release cycles, which is great. So every year you get a new new version of the specification, and browsers implement them, and it's awesome. But that presents a problem because the version of ECMAScript is, we just released version 8, but they changed the naming to not be the version number, but to be the year that the specification was released. And unfortunately, this year is 2017, and we released version 8. So you'll hear lots of people say ES8, but it's actually ES 2017. And so they're off by like one number. It would be just so much easier if it was not that. But that's what it is. It's technically ES 2017, but yeah, what do you do?
Okay. And for the curious, do you have this talk given anywhere else?
Yes, I actually did give this talk a little while back. Unfortunately, my recording of it failed. I normally record my screen when I give talks just in case the recording from the conference fails. Yeah, my recording failed, and I think they said they recorded it. They had a camera there, but I haven't heard anything about it. So either way, you can go to my talks page. I just pasted a link in the chat, and it is Tools of Modern JavaScript Projects. There's a link to OpenWest 2017 where I give this talk, but that was the only other time I've given this talk.
Cool. All right. I think I'm going to limit this down to the last question of my choosing here. And it's a two-part question again.
Okay.
Do you use Node on the back end? And what do you think of it?
So yes, PayPal was actually one of the very first big companies to adopt Node years ago, and we are very happy with that bet. We're winning with Node. It is so great. So yeah, I love Node. I think it's awesome. I'm biased because I love JavaScript. I'm not really very interested in other platforms. So yeah, I guess that answers your question. We're heavily using Node. We're not only using Node. JavaScript isn't very good with numbers, and PayPal kind of cares about numbers. And so to do like lower level transactional stuff, that's mostly Java and some C stuff at PayPal. But all of the stuff that I do is like all of my teams are full stack. And by full stack, it is the front end and kind of this middle tier, that's our node layer. And then our node layer communicates with some lower level services that are mostly Java.
Cool. All right. I think I'm going to end the talk here. Do you have any closing statements you want to give?
No, but feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. I have actually let me give you another link. I have an AMA where you can just go and ask me any question, and try to search first because I've answered over 300 questions on there. So it's quite possible that I've answered your question already. But if you have a question for me, feel free to ask me there. That's where I prefer it. I prefer that over email or something. Yeah, happy to help anybody out if I can.
All right. Well, Kent, I personally appreciate your time, and I'm sure everyone else in these classes do. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kent.
Yeah. See ya.